Hello, everyone. This is Frank Robinson, your host of NJBIA's podcast, Take on Trenton, where we have guests periodically talk about the issues that are facing the business community here in New Jersey. We have our take on what's happening that's affecting your business, and we also take on the special interests who are not quite that friendly towards business. And we're very, very happy today to have Senator Vin Gopal as our guest. Vin is a relatively new member of the state Senate, elected in 2017, took office in 2018. He represents the 11th District in Monmouth County. His district is the North Jersey Shore, so those of you who are familiar with places like Long Branch and Asbury Park, that's where Senator Vin represents. He is the caucus leader for the Democrats in the Senate. He's also chairman of the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee, vice chair of the Higher Ed Committee, and is also on the Human Resources Committee. So thank you very much for being here today, Senator.
Thank you.
Vin also has a background as being a Democratic leader in Monmouth County, and later on in the show we're going to talk about the Democratic debate for president that happened last night. We're filming this show on the Thursday of Budget Week, and we are going to talk first about what's happening in the budget. This is the 27th of June. The budget was passed by the state Senate and the Assembly on the 20th of this month, which is one of the earliest that ever happened. And the governor has until Sunday to decide what he's going to do with the budget. So tell us, Senator, what's the status on the state budget?
I think it's going good. The governor, I understand, is going to be having a press conference on Sunday. But I expect him to line item a few items in the budget. But overall, I think it was a good budget. I think it's got a lot of priorities in there for working families, and I expect it to go through.
What were some of those priorities that you had that are included in the budget?
Sure. Extraordinary special ed funding was probably my most important item. Right now, school districts across New Jersey are getting crushed by extraordinary special ed costs, and this budget actually respects closer to what the state Supreme Court is asking the state to do as it relates to that. So I think that was an important piece. I was happy to see it increase in women's health care funding. I was disappointed that our small business centers, such as the one we have at Brookdale, did not get funding, and that's something we're going to be working on a supplemental to try to get back in. But I thought overall it was a good budget. I was happy to see no taxes increased. I think that's important. New Jersey did, revenue-wise, did very well from the corporate tax in the sense that it brought a lot of revenue into the state.
Our members tell us that they gave at the office.
Yeah. So when I think the governor, his estimates last year, he was off by almost $1 billion as it related to those numbers. So revenue's coming in. And I think legislature did a good job. I heard from a lot of constituents who were very upset about the Lakewood School District getting $30 million, and I don't think you should do that. When you have a school funding formula, you should abide by that formula or change the formula, not cherry pick specific school districts. So that was taken out, and I'm sure the conversation is going to continue. I was very happy to see $500,000 for the MEP program, which was very important. When I chaired the manufacturing caucus last year, that was a priority, especially with that federal match. So I think we're, New Jersey, Monmouth County, 11th highest property taxes in the country. New Jersey, as you know better than anyone, the highest taxes of anywhere. So I thought this was a good budget that put a lot of our progressive, as a Democrat, that put a lot of our progressive principles in place, but at the same time, we held fiscal restraint.
Well, in your short time in the Senate, you've become a champion for a number of towns in your district that have had problems with their education funding, like Freehold and Red Bank, and you've been out front on that, and you've been able to get them more money?
Yeah, I remember the first time I visited Freehold Borough, and it was heartbreaking. They actually had, because of the overpopulation, they actually had cardboard boxes separating their classrooms. That's how bad the population growth was going. And the reality is we've had some districts around the state that all taxpayers have been paying for years, and a formula that didn't make any sense. So I was happy to see underfunded districts like Red Bank and Freehold Borough finally get their fair share of funding. And other districts, it's kind of crazy when you look at some of these districts around the state, the money they spent on building stadiums and a lot of other things when they just shouldn't have. The Department of Education has the discretion to give emergency funding, and a lot of these school districts, not the underfunded ones, have massive surplus accounts, so they're able to go from that. And so I think that every superintendent has their responsibility to cry wolf, and but I think this budget, especially by the Senate President, as far as fixing school funding, is in the right step. But more important than anything is we have to fix extraordinary special ed.
Well, you mentioned property taxes before, and I know that you have a couple of towns in your district that have had extraordinary problems with their property taxes, like Lock Arbor. Tell me what's going on there.
Sure. So Lock Arbor, Ocean Township has been in litigation with the schools. It all goes back to our formula of government, as former late Speaker Alan Carter said, municipal madness. But it's so much more than that. I have a bill in the Senate that I'm sponsoring. It's a piece of the Path for Progress policies that the Senate President put out. This specific piece is on school district regionalization, and it goes down from about 600 districts down to about 320, but it starts with pilots, and we really look at IT costs, healthcare costs, snow removal costs, waste management costs, so many of these costs that when you have 600 individual districts working on it, it gives us an opportunity to try to consolidate. Another problem is outside of the cost. When a child graduates from the 8th grade, they don't actually coordinate curriculums with the high school. They're two different districts. So I think we need to start looking towards regionalization, but we can do it in a humane way, do it through attrition, and I think that's vitally important. We are broke, and I have not seen any really aggressive plan to talk about how we are going to be solvent. With all respect to the governor, who I have a great deal of respect for his work ethic and his dedication to the state, a one-time $125 payment is not going to fix our long-term property tax solutions. And every time I meet somebody, they're ready to move to Florida or the Carolinas, and we really have to fix this property tax problem.
Well, and that is a major issue, as you know, for the business community. About 40, our members report that about 40% of the taxes that they pay is in property tax, which a lot of people don't realize. And we are always concerned that someone in state government is going to mess with the equity clause in state government, in the state constitution, because it's very tempting for some people to say, well, why don't we tax businesses at a higher rate? Mm-hmm. And there's always that concern. About 10 years ago, there was a move for a constitutional convention. Mm-hmm. And one of the major things that were being promoted at that point in time is let's tax business higher. You're a small business owner. You listen to a lot of small businesses over there. The whole Path to Progress issue is something the BIA has been very supportive. Prior guests on the show have been the Senate President, Steve Sweeney, who started the whole Path to Progress. We've had Senator Tom Kean, the Senate Republican leader, in talking about it too. There really hasn't been much action, though. There's about 27 bills have been put in. Do you foresee that there's going to be action in the fall or by the end of the year on more legislation?
I think so. And look, there's a wide array of agreement and disagreement. I don't necessarily support all the pieces of the 27 bills. I think there's some good things. I think they're definitely an important conversation that's worth having. But I think there needs to be some dialogue between the front office and the Senate presidents on some of these pieces, which ones he support, which ones he's receptive to. A lot of the public workers are concerned about one of the 27 bills, but there's 26 others as it relates to how we do our taxing. There's so many pieces of government that are affected by this, and I think it's an important conversation to have, and I appreciate the leadership at least having this conversation. It's not always popular.
Right. Well, and one of the major components of that we all know is how do we fix the pension and health benefits, it's my understanding that this is the largest pension contribution in the current budget that you guys just voted on, but there still needs a lot more to be done, and there doesn't seem to be a meeting of the minds yet between the legislature and the governor.
No, and I think in a press conference yesterday, the governor mentioned that he wrote the original report in 2005 on this topic. So I think it's a conversation that needs to happen. Listen, I think in a last resort to make a budget work, I'm not opposed to a tax if it's the very last resort, but that shouldn't be the initial conversation. We should look at the overall structure and at the same time respect and appreciate that, we have the best schools in the country, and we have incredible teachers and educators. And a lot of those folks are working multiple jobs now, and it's not like it used to be. So I think that all of these pieces need to be considered, and I think that's part of the challenge right now. That we have a lot of vacuums, but no one's really connecting.
Okay. Let's move on to another subject,
Sure.
one that I know that you've been very, very active in and worked with NJBIA on. And as of July 1st, the minimum wage is going up. So it's only a few days from now. It's going from $8.80 something an hour to $10 an hour on July 1st. And there's lots of anxiety out there in the business community, especially, once again, among small employers and among a lot of the employers that you represent along the Jersey Shore. Restaurant owners in all candor. My family owns a bunch of restaurants on the boardwalk in Asbury Park and in Long Branch, the senator's hometown. Lots of angst in Red Bank. There's one too called, I forget the name of it. Robinson's Ale House. But free advertising. But there's lots of concern, and you expressed a lot of concern during the whole debate. And when we had the Senate president here at one of our last shows, he reiterated his pledge to the business community, and I think to you too, that if in fact we see adverse effects to the economy and to small business, that there's corrective action that could be taken. So if you would just
Sure.
give us a little take on minimum wage.
I think that was, with all respect to the Democratic leadership, one of the worst bills I've ever even read or engaged in. And I've been a student of politics for a long while. When you were talking about the Constitutional Convention, I was reading about Joe Roberts and all of the issues that when that came up at that time. So I've been following legislation for a while, and what was so frustrating about this bill is that there were examples in other places. We saw in New York State, where New York City had one minimum wage versus upstate New York. So the things that we were asking for, that I was asking for, I thought were common sense. One, to maybe potentially go to $12 and then do an economic study, to do studies across different sectors.
I think you put in legislation.
I
to that
did.
effect.
Yeah, it didn't go anywhere.
We appreciate that.
To do studies across different sectors, right? To have a stopgap like the state of California has in case of an economic crisis or recession. My challenge is, how do you take a small business, maybe that's just one operation, right, an ice cream store or something like that, and you're going to compare that and put that at the same level playing field as someone who owns 10 restaurants, right? One has the ability to potentially pay that higher wage, the other doesn't. This is personal for me, because when I started my business the first 3 years, I worked at a restaurant, I worked at other places, and I didn't take a paycheck when I was starting my business off, as most small business owners, right? I had an embroidery and screen printing shop, and I was the person out there on Sunday screen printing the clothes. Fortunately, because of good employees, and all of my employees now, many of them who are still with me from back then, were making they were making about $10, $11, $12 back then. Now they all have very, very good competitive salaries, 401ks, health benefits, everything. And I wouldn't have lasted if I had that $15 minimum wage. So what's frustrating for me is how you take everybody and you put them in the same boat. And we are not addressing the incredibly high rents that are going across the state, which is forcing a lot of mom and pops out. We're not addressing that these small businesses and these mom and pops sometimes have an uneven playing field, and we see tax credits and advantages and rebates going to corporations coming to the state. So, even I take an example, even like the community YMCA in my district is looking at potential challenges because they have to increase. And how you take a child who might live in Rumson, who's 17 years old, and compare that to a child in Newark, where that child in Newark, there's a chance that he or she is a primary breadwinner of that family. That's not the same case in other communities. So what I hated about this bill is it treated everybody the same. It was not well thought out. So yes, I appreciate the Senate President and the Speaker, who have both indicated that they're going to monitor, and we're going to monitor to see what kind of effects this has in different industries, and to try to be as responsive as possible. And my hope is that the governor will do the same thing.
We appreciate your efforts on that part. And actually, let's move into you mentioned tax incentives and economic development, and we're going through a little bit of a debate at this point in time between the administration and legislature over the future of the tax incentive programs, which have been around in New Jersey for about 20 years. It was in the late 1990s. As a matter of fact, I worked on some of the bills when I worked in the legislature of the BEAT program, the BRAG program. There was the whole update of those programs back in, I guess it was 2013, and recently the governor has been saying that there's been some shenanigans going on. The legislature is doing its own investigation of what's happening with those programs, and the governor has his own task force that's caused a lot of consternation. The legislature passed an extension. Both the ERG and the GROW economic development plans are scheduled to go out of business as 3 days from now on June the 30th. Both houses of the legislature passed, and our members, we've been telling about this, an extension for about 7 months. The governor has threatened to veto those bills, which is causing anxiety among a lot of our members. We believe that those programs have been good for the most part. If someone's done something wrong, they should absolutely face the music on that. But leaving New Jersey without any economic tax incentive programs, we think is bad for the economy.
Sure.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I agree. I abstained on that bill for the purpose. I don't think that the legislature or the governor has done a good job in explaining what some of the challenges have been. Clearly, there are some issues because both branches have opened up their own investigations, and the legislature, headed by Senator Smith, has opened up their investigation, as well as I think the Assembly under Gordon Johnson, and then the governor's office has. And I think there needs to be some more clarity. I thought it was a disaster when there are certain elected officials who wanted Amazon not to be there. I think that does not help. I think tax incentives in any form, especially when we had in Long Branch years ago with the UEZ zones in Asbury Park, which was a form of an incentive, I think they can be very beneficial. But I do think that the leadership in the governor's office, as well as the legislature, we need to figure out where the challenges are with the EDA program and make sure they don't happen again, if there are any. Because right now they're all just accusations.
Do you think that anything is going to happen over the summertime, or because I know that legislature traditionally goes out of business for a couple of months after the budget is signed or not signed, if the governor threatens to veto those bills, we won't have anything for months and months. Any thoughts coming back in the fall or the summertime to work on this?
I would really love to see them sit down and work this out on this issue. There are disagreements on this. Maybe they can work out the number of months. Maybe they can work out, they got to work something out here. And I think we need to have a better understanding also what EDA programs right now are at risk, that if they get shut down in the next few months, how is that going to affect which areas of the state? And I think a lot of that information is still lacking. Okay.
Well, you can accept this as formal lobbying from NJBIA that we need some action out of the legislature and the governor on that. We appreciate it.
Got it.
And last big subject I wanted to talk about was marijuana. Been very controversial and talked about for almost the last 2 years about the three-legged stool: legalization, decriminalization, and the expansion of medical marijuana. We know that there have been a lot of speed bumps along the way this year. What's the status of marijuana?
So there's clearly not the votes definitely in the Senate. I don't want to speak for the Assembly, and I don't know. I don't know, but the Senate, well publicized in reports, the votes are not there. There's a number of senators who've been around a while, specifically Senator Rice, Senator Cody, I believe Senator Andrzejak, Senator Cruz Perez. I read. A number of them are opposed, and I think on the Republican side, the only one I saw in favor, I believe, was Senator O'Scanlan. So you got to get to 21 votes, and they're not there. I support legalization of marijuana. I have concerns with decriminalization, because for me it's important on the criminal justice issue, but also getting rid of the black market. I'm not sure how we do that. And a lot of the studies and what I've read and looked at say that when someone's selling a dealer on the side, whether they're in Newark or Camden or wherever they may be, they start with selling with marijuana, and then they usually move to a harder drug, and you don't know what's in that product. So I do think there's an extraordinary amount of hypocrisy just in the conversation overall, because we do legalize nicotine, we do legalize alcohol, and there have been effects of that have been not great. And I think there needs to be some indication of personal responsibility on an individual. So with the votes not there, I believe, again, from what I've read and what I've heard from various members, is that there's probably going to be an effort to try to get this on the ballot in 2020. Poll after poll shows it's overwhelmingly favorable. And my hope is that we can actually focus our law enforcement dollars on going after violent criminals.
Well, as you know, one of the major issues regarding marijuana in the business community has been marijuana in the workplace.
Sure.
And you've been supportive, and we're very thankful, as has the Senate President and the Speaker, regarding the rights of employers in the workplace. And those protections are in all the versions of the bill.
As should be with alcohol or anything else.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes. And we appreciate that. Well, so, I appreciate you being here today, but one last question. Last night, for those of you that are viewing this, was the first debate of the Democratic presidential candidates. Senator Gopal, before he came to the state Senate, was a very influential county chairman of the Democratic Party in Monmouth County.
All 6 Democrats there.
And so did you watch the debates last night, and what did you think? Especially, I know that you've endorsed Senator Cory Booker, New Jersey's own senator here, and lots of people saying they thought the senator did a good job.
Look, I thought he did excellent. In full disclosure, I worked on Senator Booker's 2006 mayoral campaign, one of the first campaigns I worked on, and he comes to Monmouth County every year, and I think he's been an extraordinary U.S. senator. I thought he did the best, and I know I'm a little biased, but I think a lot of people saw that and thought that, and it's early in the race. We remember the 2012 or 2016 was great. 2012 Republican, and one day Santorum was up, then the guy who owned the pizza shops was up, and they would keep flipping every 2 weeks. So this is early. I think these debates are healthy. It's amazing to see this many candidates. I can't name even half of them. So, and they're all legitimate governors and respectable people. So I think that. Cory's one of the most talented elected officials out there. I don't agree with all of his position statements, but you don't agree with anybody 100%. But I think he would be an incredible advocate, especially as we look towards our transportation, our infrastructure challenges going through New York and New Jersey. There's nobody that knows it better than he does. So I'm hopeful that he continues to do well.
He's actually doing New Jersey very proud. One last question.
Sure.
Because I know you recently were named as chairman of the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. Issues that my wife is a 10-year veteran of the United States Air Force, served in Europe, and lots of us believe that veterans haven't been treated right, not only in New Jersey, but in the country. And I know it's become a big cause for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about your work with
Sure, we have
veterans.
thank you, and God bless your wife. We have a significant veterans population in my district, but we remember, for me, growing up in Monmouth County, being there my whole life, I remember how much of a devastating impact it had when Fort Monmouth left us many years ago. It crushed the economy locally. We lost all those folks to Aberdeen, Maryland. And now our biggest priority is to make sure the same thing doesn't happen to Fort Dix. So we're working with our federal representatives, Congressman King, Congressman Smith, Booker, and Menendez, to make sure that when the next BRAC decisions come through, that we're not in this position. We've gotten Monmouth County Board of Chosen Freeholders, Burlington County Chosen Freeholders, and the Ocean County Freeholders, 3 different parties, all working together, funding on this project. So that is number one. And then number 2 is to make sure that every veteran that comes back, that they're treated with every opportunity possible. It drives me crazy when I see, $30 million for Lakewood schools or half the other stuff that we see, and we're not doing our basic task of making sure that every veteran who comes back who served our country so honorably has the opportunity for employment, help if needed, all these things that are just overlooked. And I think it's a very frustrating thing. And I think the law enforcement community does a good job amongst itself. The firefighter community does a good job amongst itself, and the veterans groups do a good job. But because they're not technically part of government the same way these other groups are, state government, they have to rely on federal agencies, like the VA. So I think the state of New Jersey, we have a terrific leader, General Beal, who lives in my district in Ocean Township, and he's done an incredible job. So without a doubt, I think this is an important issue, and it shouldn't be a political one.
Okay. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being with us today, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank
Senator
you.
Vin Gopal, representing the 11th District over in Monmouth County, and is chairman of the Veteran and Military Affairs here in the state, and doing a great job for the business community. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.